Susie had said she would make it, so when she logs on, that'll give us a quorum. Amy, did you get the agenda I sent?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me pull it up.
I texted the others to see. I haven't got a response yet, but oh, Susie says she's working on getting into the meeting right now.
Okay, perfect.
Both Susie and Fabian say they're trying to get on, but I guess they're having troubles. Can you resend them the link, Ryan?
Yeah, will do.
Okay, thanks. Just to Fabian and to Susie. Hi, Fabian. Can you hear me? Fabian, can you hear us? We can see you. Can you hear us? Oh, connecting to audio. Okay. Can you hear us now, Fabian? Okay. So we do have a quorum, Amy, if we want to get started, and then when Susie gets on, she can just.
Okay. So we'll call the meeting to order at 12:10. And do we rise and say the pledges? Or how do we do that this way?
Yeah, I mean, normally we do at a regular meeting, we would do it,
Yeah.
but I mean, this is really just a work session, so
True.
we don't have to.
Okay, perfect. So then we'll move on to approval of the agenda for today.
I'll make that motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay. Motion by Ms. Esquivel. Do we have a second?
You're on mute, Fabian.
I second the motion.
Okay, and seconded by Mr. Della O. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So we'll move on to item number 3, discussion items.
Yes, we have Brian here, our business manager, to do a presentation on where we stand
Hi,
on
how
the
are
budget
you?
for next year.
Okay, well, good
Hello.
afternoon, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Lucas. Yeah, so I wanted to do, or we're required to do a budget meeting, and so I've prepared a couple things to talk about in preparation for the full budget presentation next week at the regularly scheduled board meeting. And so I'll just go through a couple things. Some of this might be repetitive for some of you, but I think others it might be a good refresher as to how the school's funded. We'll go over the revenues that we're getting for FY25. I'll compare that to what we got in the current year, FY24, and then kind of talk about the budget just in general, some of the challenges that we've had to face this year. I will say, or I'll at least start off with that I think in the last 5 or 6 years, and probably even further, that this was probably one of the more or most challenging budget years. And I'll go through some of those reasons as we get to the budget. But at any time, if anyone has any questions or anything, just feel free to interrupt me, and I'll do my best to kind of explain what we're looking at. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And we'll just get started. So can everyone see? Hopefully you can see a spreadsheet.
We can see it.
Okay, good. Is it big enough? All right. If it needs to be bigger, just let me know. So one of the things I like to do just to kind of help explain, where these numbers are coming from. So what I have here, this is called our 910B5. This is our SEG, our State Equalization Guarantee. This document represents the formula that the state establishes each year in the legislative session that, based off our student membership, calculates our SEG, or our revenue for our operational fund. So this is really the main source of funding that we receive at the district. And so we'll kind of walk through this together just so that everyone can have a good understanding of how this works. And then we'll compare the current year to what we have for FY25. And so just jumping right in, what you can see here, this is our input. And so what these numbers represent is our student membership. And this is the average of the 8120 days. So, you see 11.5. It's because of the average. So we submit our student counts at the 40-day, the 80-day, and the 120-day. And for purposes of our funding for state equalization guarantee, they take the average membership for both the 80 and 120-day. And that's really the input into this formula. And so what you'll see here on the left-hand side, this is our student membership average for the 8120-day. And then you can see on the right side, there's a factor that each of these memberships get multiplied by to get us to what we call program units. And so program units, well, you'll see at the bottom how those come into play. But this is the input, and I just want to kind of clarify that student membership really is what drives the funding that we receive. And then as we go through this document, you'll see that there's different factors or different multipliers that we get funded for in addition to just the membership. So the first one of these factors, or first one of these multipliers, we call it the staffing cost multiplier. This is our TCI, our teacher cost index. So in the past, you'll remember that this used to be T&E, or training and experience. But over the past couple of years, the state's phased that out and gone to a full TCI multiplier. And so the easiest way to explain what this is that based off of our teacher licensure level and years of experience, we receive a multiplier. And this is strictly for teachers that are paid for out of our operational funds. So if we pay, for example, a teacher out of Title I or IDB or any other fund other than operational, they do not help us in regards to our operational SEG funding. And so the higher the licensure level, the higher the years of experience, the higher the TCI multiplier. And these multipliers do have probably the most significant impact on our SEG. They definitely carry a lot of weight. And so just kind of following through this document, you can see our membership gets multiplied by this multiplier to get us an adjusted program units. And this just continues to flow through the document until we get to the bottom. And so next we have our special education. And so we have our AB membership, our C gifted, D gifted, and then our ancillary FTE. Those get multiplied by a different factor. Our bilingual program, which we do not have. We do receive funding for elementary fine arts. And this is really just the average 8120 day of our total elementary. Elementary PE, we receive some funding for. And the size adjustments, this has kind of gone down the past couple of years, but we do receive some, a little bit of funding for the size adjustments, but you can see here that it gets kind of taken out. And so this was something that happened the past couple of years where the state kind of, not necessarily penalized, but kind of took away the funding that we used to receive for being a small district or located in a rural location. But then to try to make up for that, we did get some rural population funding here that you can see. And so this is our 8120 day average membership. Our at-risk factor, each year the state assigns an at-risk index, and that is applied to all of our student membership. Growth, if we were to project any growth for the next fiscal year, meaning that we would project increases in enrollment, you are allowed to budget for that, but being conservative, we typically don't budget for this growth. And the reason for that is if we do budget for growth, they would give us funding for that. But if we did not hit it, they would take that money back. And so we like to build our budget based off of the bare minimum. And then if we do get growth, that's great. And we'll get additional funding in the next fiscal year. And we'll project or we'll present an increased bar at that time if we did get additional funding. National Board Certified Teachers. We do not have any in our SEG for next fiscal year. And then homeschooled students, we have one membership. We get a little bit of funding for that individual. And lastly, I know that this has been a big topic, the calendars. We don't participate in any of the K-12 plus or any of those programs, but I know that the lawsuit, I think, is currently ongoing regarding that 180 days. But this would be something if we were to do or to participate in those K-12 plus programs, which most schools do not. And so all of this being said gets us to what we call our total program units. And so going through all these different factors and everything, we end up at about 1,140 program units. And then this is the number that gets multiplied by the unit value. And so every year the state education department assigns a unit value, a preliminary unit value that we use for budgeting purposes. And for FY25, that preliminary unit value is 6,442. That's a small increase compared to the current year. I will say that, that is the preliminary unit value. So this could go up or down next fiscal year. They typically don't release the final unit value until about January of the fiscal year. So January 2025, hopefully we should receive our final unit value. And most of the time, I will say, it's usually the final unit value is higher than what the preliminary one is. It's not always the case, but that has been kind of the trend the past couple of years. And so those program units times the unit value ultimately arrives at our total SEG. So you can see for FY25, based off of the preliminary 910B5, we're expecting to receive about 7.35 million for FY25. So that's next year's revenue. And so what I like to do is kind of summarize that into dollars by each category so that we can see where the increases are, where the decreases are, where we're gaining funding, where we're losing funding, and then just kind of overall compare the 2 years. So here at the top, you can see FY24's unit value was 6241. Next year's 6442. So about a 3.22% increase in unit value. And so here on the left-hand side, this is the input that I talked about. This is our student membership inputs on that 910B5 that we just went through. And this is prior, or I should say current year, FY24, compared to what we're getting funded for in FY25. And then here's just a column that calculates the difference so that you can see any increases or decreases. So easy way to see this would be that we decreased our enrollment in kindergarten approximately 9.75 between the 2 years. Our 5 membership between grades 1-12, going from 375 to 370. This middle part here, this is our program units. So going back to the 910B5, that's this column here. So that's our membership getting multiplied by any factors. And that kind of gives you an idea of the difference that we're experiencing on program units. And then lastly, the program dollars. So that's taking the program units times the unit value so that you can see any increases and decreases. So here, for example, this decrease of 9.75 membership in kindergarten in dollars results in about almost 80,000 in decreased funding in FY25. And that's with the increase in the unit value. So, grades 1-12, we lost 5 membership, but because of the increase in the unit value, we're still netting a positive 49,898. And so only really big ones to really, I guess, pay attention to. So we did get a lot of increased funding in our ancillary. It looks to be really related to an increase in our ancillary FTE going from 2.29 to 3.03 in FY25. That got us about an extra 130,688 for next fiscal year. When you take into account all the increases and decreases, what we're left with at the bottom here is we're getting about an extra 92,487 in FY25 compared to what we received in FY24. And then this is kind of where we'll get into why this was a challenging budget. And so percentage-wise, you can see it's only 1.27% of an increase in total funding. However, the challenges that we experienced in putting together this budget for the current or for FY25 is the state had mandatory 3% raises for all staff. And so you can see just right off the bat that the funding that we received was not enough to cover even just those mandatory increases. In addition to the increases that we had to build into the budget, health insurance benefits went up tremendously compared to the current year in FY25. Our insurance that we pay on our buildings, here I have, this is our insurance document. Current year, FY24, our risk premium, this is the insurance that we pay on our property, our vehicles, our buses, everything, was 273,000. And next year for FY25, those premiums have gone up to 345,000. So they put here the percentage increase. That's a 26% increase just in insurance that we have to pay. And this is not just I just want to clarify, this is not a Lordsburg isolated problem. This is something that all schools are facing in the state, and every school is having to deal with this. The big thing that we've kind of been planning for the past couple of years, which I'm sure you're aware of, is that the ESSER funds, we received large amounts of ESSER funds after COVID in 2020 that was utilized over the past couple of years. And so just to kind of give you an idea, in the current year budget, FY24, about 1.1 million of that budget was utilized with those ESSER funds. And we've known that those funds would be expiring next fiscal year in September. And so the plan, at least the past couple of years in our budget, is trying to build up our cash balance as large as possible to be prepared for when those funds were gone. And so next fiscal year is the first year in the past 4 years that we've had to have a budget without those ESSER funds. And that was a big source of funding that we will not have going forward. So those were the challenges that we've kind of experienced as we've been putting together the budget, just a decrease in funding, increase in expenditures, and trying to balance a budget without having to cut any positions or make any significant changes. And so I can say that, so what we have done for the FY25 budget is we've included the 3% increase for all staff, including the superintendent. That's been built into the budget. We reclassified all of our expenditures that were previously paid for out of ESSER that we felt like that we needed to maintain those services, whether it be a position, which is the majority of those ESSER funds were positions. And we've reclassified those to operational or to another fund if possible. If we have additional funding in a different fund that could absorb those costs, we've put those into there. I will say we project to finish the current fiscal year with approximately about 760,000 in cash reserves, which is approximately like 12.7, almost 13% of our SEG that we receive, which is, I would say, on the high end. Most districts shoot for about 5% cash reserves to hold. And so the reason that those cash reserves are so high is kind of related to what I was talking about with the ESSER funding going away. And it's just been the kind of plan the past couple of years to try to get that balance up just for this reason that we went through as far as knowing that those funds would have to be absorbed. And so we were able to balance the budget for FY25. However, we did need to utilize, and I'll go over this in more detail when I present the actual budget on Monday. We will have to utilize approximately about 300,000 of those cash reserves. And so what we'll be left with for FY25 will be close to 400,000 in cash, which is still going to be right around that 5% mark for our cash reserves for the ending fiscal year FY25. And that's something that we'll just kind of have to monitor throughout the next fiscal year, because we do know that it's not sustainable to have to use cash every year to balance the budget. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that the state will increase the funding in the next fiscal year, but we can't plan for that. And so we'll see what happens throughout the fiscal year. But for this current budget, we didn't want to necessarily have any significant changes. The staffing we felt like was adequate for the membership that we have. And then from a department or a school site, non-payroll budget, we kind of take the approach of really just budgeting the things that we know are fixed, our utilities, our insurance, any contracts that we know we'll have to enter into next fiscal year, our software, etc. And then whatever is left, we would allocate to supplies and materials, professional development. And this will all be in more detail on Monday. And then the excess, that 400,000 that I mentioned, we'll put into a reserve account to be there if we need it for whatever reason. We'll still have those reserves built up and saved. But those are the main things that I just kind of wanted to cover as we've kind of gone through this budget. There's not really any significant changes to the budget for next fiscal year. It's kind of budgeting similar to the current year, with just those increases that I talked about, the 3% raises, the benefits, the insurance. Those are really the only significant changes from FY24 going into FY25. And then, of course, the absorbing of the ESSER funding going into our operational fund due to not having that funding next fiscal year. But I did want to just kind of share that with you and kind of answer any questions that you might have, just from what I've talked about here. What I'll do on Monday is I'll prepare a PowerPoint that will kind of break out in more detail, similar to what we've always done in the past, and it'll kind of give more detail as to how much funding is being spent on, say, salary, benefits, instruction. I'll have all of that information on Monday when I present the full budget.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. I know it was a lot to cover like it all at once, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how we get funded, and then at least the challenges that we had to kind of jump through to balance the budget this year. Did anyone have any questions about anything or anything related to the budget for next year?
Brian, this is Alyssa. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Here comes my question. So on the insurance part,
Uh-huh.
we can't find any other insurance that will come lower than 26% for next year?
I've actually been asked that question a lot this year, and I totally see why. But my answer is you can shop around for other insurance if possible. But what I've experienced, or at least my understanding, is that the Palms is kind of like a collective, meaning like all the districts, all the schools use Palms, so together they have greater bargaining power to where that Palms most likely is going to be our best bet. It will be the cheapest option. But it doesn't mean that we can't look around to see. But my understanding is that because all the schools combine to do this, that is most likely going to be our best option as far as like total cost. But I mean, we can look. We can definitely look.
Okay, with the school buses, that's just saying that we needed to get insurance, like a rental, right, Dr. Lucas? For like, that's not the activity buses, that's like the overall buses throughout the district.
Yeah,
Right,
this is
that's
all buses.
all of them.
And that's required by, the contractor to have that insurance?
Well, so these are our buses. We don't pay for the contractor's insurance.
Okay.
Okay, so this would just be for everything that the district owns. And the biggest chunk of it's like our buildings. This 205, and then general liability is kind of there just to cover, someone slips and falls or whatever. And then the workers' compensation, but then the bottom two here would be all the school vehicles and then the school-owned buses. But this is like I've done two other budgets prior to this one, and Lordsburg is the lowest percent increase, which is still crazy to say given that it's 20.
Yeah. Well, I think all like insurance in general is going up,
It is, yeah. I mean,
like
the health
personal
benefits.
insurance and stuff, so.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that maybe we can look into something that can kind of, well, not kind of, but have the full coverage like this one, but maybe a lower percentage. That's a big jump.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested to see, and I'm sure that there's other districts that would even be willing to kind of like what I was saying with the bargaining power thing, that if other districts would say, and I'm just throwing out ideas, let's say like Animus and Deming or whatever wanted to also shop around and say that they would go collectively, that might give us more bargaining power. But I mean, these are all things that we could talk about. I mean, it's been a question that's actually been brought up at a lot of my budget presentations is exactly that. Why do we have to use palms? Do we have to? Because it is kind of crazy, but the response that I've gotten has always been that it's our best option. But I don't know.
Yeah, and if we do go elsewhere, we'd have to make sure that they understand the school businesses. Like, we've had a couple of lawsuits that the insurance company, although I don't like that the insurance company wants to settle, but they have to know that that's always a possibility. So, I mean, they have to specialize in, I think, government entities.
Yeah. It's not, or it wouldn't hurt to like look at something
No,
else,
not at all,
but,
not at all.
but if not, then I guess we'll stay and do what we gotta do.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, so in addition to the 3% raises that the staff received, and I'll go over this in more detail on Monday. I mean, the health benefits went up a lot too. Dental, vision, everything, medical. I mean, it's across the board on both the employer side and on the employee side, which is, I mean, I haven't really looked to be honest, but I don't even know if the 3% increase that they're receiving has been enough to cover what they're going to have to pay in increased benefits, which is unfortunate to say, but that's probably very likely.
Well, thank you, Brian, for answering my question.
Yeah, sure. It was a hard, I mean, the last couple of years, not that they were easy, but I mean, this is the first year where I always expect the state to underfund what they have us do. You know, the 3% raises and not getting funding, but it's not something new. But again, I mean, I guess the only thing that we can do, you know, as a board or the district is try to lobby with our legislatures and voice these problems so that when they go into legislative session next year that you know that they try to remedy this because I don't know where they calculate you know how they feel that this is enough to cover what we have to cover, but it's just one of the frustrations that I constantly have to deal with. But I mean, I always advocate that you know if we the more we can talk to them about it, the better. So just something to keep in mind.
And you said this is the 180 calendar that we're looking at, and if.
No. So yeah, no, this is off of our normal calendar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, if we have to go the 180-day calendar, it will probably look a little worse.
It'll look a lot worse, I would assume.
And
Yeah.
then we have to revisit that, right, budget?
Right,
And
right.
approve that, okay.
we would have to revisit that and approve that. Also, I need to make a correction. The contractor buses are covered under our insurance policy. So we do pay the insurance policy on the contractor buses.
When will we know about the 180 days?
So
Have
they
an
had a
idea.
hearing, yesterday and the judge granted our injunction. However, he had some questions for both sides, and he gave each side 10 days to respond to those questions. So, and he said he may change his mind after that. So we're thinking it'll stay the same and the injunction should be good, but we won't know for 10 days for sure whether he's going to change his mind or not. I would not think Ped would have to come up with something extraordinary to get him to change his mind, I think.
Yeah, I listened in on that case yesterday and I agree. I mean, again, being optimistic, I feel like the case for the districts was strong, and I mean, I would expect that to stand. We'll see.
Plus, I noticed when I looked on the court website that there was the teachers union that their attorneys filed alongside with us with
Well, it's an amicus brief. Yeah, they signed in support of us. Yes.
and they're trying to get that thrown out because they say that they have no merit to
Oh,
stand on because that we already have enough attorneys and that this one's just gonna get in the way and cause it to be prolonged.
yeah. Well, we're not going to let them actually join as a participant of the lawsuit because
No,
of
they're
that very
not joined
reason.
as a participant, but they're in there as an interested party.
Right, as an interested, yeah, and the same with the School Boards Association.
Yeah.
So it'll strictly still be our attorneys, hopefully, but yeah.
And in my
But
districts,
they're
even
worried
my
that they're gonna go ahead and, you know, when they speak their piece, that the judge is gonna take what they have to say
Yeah,
into consideration.
yeah.
even my districts that aren't affected by that 180-day join the lawsuit. I mean, I think it's a common or a unanimous, or for the most part. I mean, everyone agrees that it's not right, but
Yeah. Hopefully.
yeah, that's. I mean, also Monday
The board.
I'll present the full budget. But I think the biggest takeaways is just the challenges that we had to face, the funding not really being enough to cover it, and then just knowing that we're going to utilize approximately about 300,000 of our cash carryover to balance the budget for FY25. And then us just knowing that that's not sustainable. So we'll have to, throughout the next fiscal year, really kind of look at our expenses, maybe trim anything that we can. And then on the flip side, I always like to focus on the revenues too, which I think is overlooked a lot, but trying to build up our revenues as much as possible, maybe seeing if we can get that TCI up, or the membership is hard. It's always hard to to bring up, especially, like in Lordsburg, but I think, what I mentioned to Dr. Lucas is that we didn't experience the decrease in enrollment as much as a lot of my other schools have experienced, and that was a big hit for sure. So I'm not overly concerned with the decrease in enrollment, but I would like to see that go up. But then going back to what I was saying, I think we'll look at the expenses, but then I'll also focus on the revenues and see if there is any options or any opportunities to try to get our revenues up, because that's always something that we can try to do.
And to repeat that again, Brian, that you said about the COVID money fund,
Mhm.
we're gonna transfer that over for 2025, right? You said?
Yeah, it's and all the numbers that I showed you here, and in that us using that 300,000, that's all been moved to operational. So no part of our FY25 budget is using those funds anymore. So it's all been absorbed already.
Yeah, this was the last school year we could use those funds.
So I guess we're gonna be poor then pretty soon.
Well, not
I'm just playing,
yeah.
I'm just playing.
kind of, but yeah.
I mean, I think that what I told Dr. Lee, I think that we can get to where we need to be, which is like at least breaking even, meaning that we don't have to use cash to balance our budget.
Okay,
Right, like by looking at supplies, materials, other
Yeah.
expenses. And
Looking
also,
at
as people
other
leave, we
funds.
need to look at possibly absorbing positions. We did that a few years back, right after the pandemic, and that helped us quite a bit. But we probably still need. We just need to look at positions as people leave.
Yeah. And then looking at other funds that we have, just trying to utilize them the best that we can, meaning that, we can try to reduce the impact on operational as much as possible by the other awards that the district receives, making sure that we spend those down, and that we really get the best benefit, out of those funds for the kids that those programs are for. But yeah, like Dr. Lucas said, I think looking at positions and staffing, I'm confident that we can get that 300,000 of cash that we're using. I'm sure we can identify just a little bit here, a little bit there, with the goal being that we can break even, because then that would mean that we're sustaining, meaning that we don't have to reduce anything. But then next year, who knows? Well, they could do 5% raises and then not fund it. It's always a moving target, but like I mentioned, that the final unit value could come in higher, which has been historically what happens, and that could help with that 300,000 as well. So there's a lot of different things that could happen, but we'll monitor it throughout the year for sure next year.
Is it possible for us to have like a mid fiscal year update to kind of see where we're at?
Yeah. So I think I would like that, actually. It'd actually be good
Okay.
for me. So I know each month I give it in the board packets, like it does have the budget info, but we don't really talk about it really. I mean, it's there, but I mean, I would love, maybe mid-year we could just evaluate where we are, what it's looking like, and we can identify at that time any potential issues. I think that would be great.
Mhm.
We could do that.
Perfect, thank you.
Sure. So that last thing I'll say, so on Monday, I know this is all focused on operational, and I think that's just another thing to keep in mind is that, this is the main fund that we are responsible for approving. Other funds, we haven't even received the award letters for. Some of them are kind of trickling in. So like, for example, Title I or Idea B, I think we've gotten like a CTE award. Those are just going to keep trickling in from now until June 30th. But when I do the presentation on Monday, the only federal funds that will be included in that budget will be funds that either we've already received or that we know we're going to receive next year. And if I haven't received an award, I'll just budget what we currently got in the current year. So like as an example, SB9, we collect property taxes for that. I don't know exactly how much that's going to be next year, but we'll use current year numbers to kind of give us an idea for next year. And so those things will be in that budget, and I'll go through those in more detail as well on Monday.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions? No?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll move on to public comment.
Ryan, do we
have
have any emails?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Perfect. Then I guess we're adjourned.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll see you all on Monday.
Are you